Now recording. So welcome everybody to this talk for those watching the recording. So I'm now going to share my screen and show us the wee presentation that we're going to have today. All going well. This should work nicely. So if I press this button and then that button there, you should all now see a presentation in front of you. So what we're going to do today is we're mainly focusing on the research study report today. So there's lots of resources and lots of information out there so far, and we're going to basically build on that to synthesize what information we already have and look at the actual writing up of the research report and the structure that we've got from that. So we're going to discuss what actually goes into the structure of the research study report. We're going to look at the difference between the title, the line of inquiry, and the aims that are specified in that. We're going to have a brief look at some of the sources of data that you might choose to use for the research study report. We're going to look a big question people have asked about is the whole idea of sustainability and how to incorporate sustainability into the research study reports. So we're going to be looking at that in a little bit of detail as well. Then what we're going to do is going to get you guys doing some bit of work as well. And we're going to split you into breakout rooms and to have a bit of a brainstorming discussion moment there. And then we'll finish up with a lovely Q&A session at the end. I should add at this point as well, I've got my colleague Alan Walsh here beside me, nicely socially distanced on the other side of the room. He's going to be monitoring the chat box throughout the evening. So if you have any questions as I'm talking, don't be afraid to pop them in there. And Alan will happily answer the questions and address any questions to me to answer when we come to the Q&A session. So hopefully you like what we're going to be talking about today. So what we're going to, at this stage now, for those of you with 6th-year economics classes, you're probably all well and truly into the research study report at this stage. And your students are probably all working away. And if you're not already aware, there's been an extension from the deadline from December to mid-January, an undefined date in mid-January. So in the pro forma booklet that was sent out to us all, there's 4 clear sections for students to fill out, and a clear 5th section as well in the outline marking scheme and structure that was given to us. There's the introduction, the research process, conclusion, reflection, and then communication, presentation, and overall coherence. So what we're going to do now is basically we're going to go through each of these sections as to what could potentially go into them. Now, the key thing to understand from this, that from the outset of all this, is that this is there's a lot of flexibility here. It's a lot of stuff that's very open for all of us to interpret as we see fit. So what I do in my school could be completely different to someone else in another school, and that's completely fine and okay as well. So what I'm showing you today is one potential interpretation of the stuff. You may agree with me, you may disagree with me, that's absolutely fine as well. There's no set structure to some regard as to what is required. So the first section we're going to look at here now is the introduction. Okay, so there's several key bullet points here in the introduction. Okay, the first one is that you have to have, now notice a few things, the word count. Okay, the word count is very, very nicely broken down for us in this. We're told that for the introduction, we have to have a minimum of 200 words and a maximum of 250 words. So for this, they've told us exactly what they want in it. Okay, they want to have a title for the research study report. Now we're going to spend a bit of time later on discussing the difference between the title, the line of inquiry, and the aims, because there'll be a bit of confusion as to what is actually meant by each of those things. Here we go. The next thing is state the individual line of inquiry as an economic question, problem, or issue which is to be addressed. So it's very clear what we need to put into this. We need to put in the title that's given to us. Okay, the title is we want to have it be a fairly focused and specific area that the student wants to look at. The line of inquiry then is the economic question. So it's the what is it the student is looking to find out, okay? Then what they're going to do is they're going to have the aims, okay? So these are the 3 main components of the research study report. Now, it's not an essay, it's a research study report. And that's a very clear thing to get in your head. That's very clear in the documentation from all this. It's a research study, not an essay. Okay, so there's a title, the line of inquiry, the aims, and the aims that it says there is in the context of the learning outcomes. Okay, so the learning outcomes is what we have in our specification, what we're going to be teaching on the actual course itself. So if your student is whatever topic area in economics your students are deciding to use for their research study, those aims that they're hoping to achieve should relate back to the learning outcomes of the course in some respect. So in other words, you're not doing something that's completely off the course, it's something that's on the course. The best way that I'm looking at this really is that if you think about something that the students really enjoyed while you were teaching the course, and they wanted to, relate that to the real world and look at something into a bit more detail on that. Okay, now the next part in that section there is to select relevant and reliable sources of information and data. And it says minimum 2 sources are required, 1 must be quantitative. Okay, so we're going to come back to this one in the next bits later. It says a minimum of 2. Okay, doesn't give a maximum, so be wary as to how many you actually give in this context. 1 must be quantitative, fair enough, okay, but that other source could come from a wide range of everything. So it could be something simple as a newspaper article or a media article relating to it, or it could be something far more academic like a book on the matter. But the key thing is 1 should be quantitative. And why does that have to be quantitative? Because the students have to interpret the data on it, okay? That's the reasoning behind that. Be careful about choosing too many sources, because there is a part in the next bit which we'll look at where the students are to evaluate and on the sources as well. So we need to find the balance there between giving too much, on giving too many sources, and then running out of a word count as well. So just be conscious of that too. Okay, so what's going into the introduction is very, very clear there from my reading of it, is that they want to have a title, a line of inquiry, which is your economic question, your aims, which relate to your learning outcomes, and these are the sources of information that you're going to be using. So that you've 200 to 250 words of what to go in there. Now, there's lots of other stuff you could include in there as well as to why you want to study this. So the rationale as to why you've chosen this topic, why this is of interest to you. There's lots of scope for you to continue on within that, as long as you don't go over your 250 words word count. But in terms of what needs to be there, as it says, this has come from the SEC documentation, the research report structure and outline marking scheme. So if this is an outline of the marking scheme they're looking for, then these presumably are the tick boxes they could potentially be looking for. So you wouldn't want to be submitting one without these key bits in it. Okay, moving on now into from part 1 into part 2, which is the actual research process itself. Okay, again, this seems to be the main body of it. There's looking for a minimum of 650 to a max of 750 words here. Okay, and the first one on this is very interesting. It says the research process should be based on the application of economic concepts and economic theory to the line of inquiry. So what I would say, my understanding of that is they're looking for clear textbook knowledge, as they say, so, or your true proper economic knowledge relating to this. As we've alluded to before, it doesn't look like they want us going off the specification. It looks like it's something from the specification that they want. Remember, they said our aims have to relate to the specification. So it's something that we've covered in class they want in more detail. So here, this would relate quite similarly to the equivalent of other programs, say, for example, the International Baccalaureate, which would be another equivalent to Leaving Cert on an international level. They would have a similar research report required in their internal assessments, which is also worth 20%. And in that, that's where they have to state the pure, in this part, they'd have to state the pure economic theory. So what would often be described as the textbook knowledge that relates to what they are looking at. So if you're looking at, say, for example, I'm just picking random topics. If you're looking at, say, employment, that you're giving the theoretical knowledge of employment here. If you're looking at, say, supply and demand, you're giving the theoretical knowledge of supply and demand at this point here. Now we're getting into the actual research part itself. And this is where it says, analyze, interpret, and evaluate the selected sources of information and data to make relevant and informed arguments and judgments. Okay, so there's quite a few bits and quite a bit in this, okay? Firstly, what we want to be doing is we need to be taking the information or the data that we found out about whatever it is we're looking at. Now, in terms of what data you could look at, there's plenty of resources on data. We will touch on them slightly. The PDSC have given lots and lots of information of sources where we can get data from. So the students have to look up some sort of quantitative, some numerical data relating to their topic area. If students are struggling on that, what I've been saying to my students, and this isn't universally true, there's lots of different approaches you can take on this. But one particular way you could do this is look at, say, for example, look at your chosen topic pre-COVID. So, for example, take 2019 data and look at data then, for example, in COVID. So in a lot of stuff, Q2 2020 data is available, and you could do a comparison between the two of them. So what you're doing in this section is you're stating, here's the data I found out, here's what the data is saying, okay? And you give it, so you're very much interpreting the data. Here's my data. And this is the next bit here, as it says here, it can be presented in tabular or graphical formats. And it's important to note that when you're presenting tables or graphs or anything like that, doesn't count as part of the word count. So you're giving the information and then you're explaining the information so that whoever's reading it can understand what it is you're doing. Okay. What also the key thing as well, there's another side to this that you could look at as well. They're asking you to evaluate the selected source of information and data. That could be taken to mean that you're asked to evaluate the source of information in terms of the quality of the source of information. So for example, is there bias? Is it a good source? So for example, if you're taking information from the Central Statistics Office, is it a good source of information? Well, yes, it is, because it is the main source of statistical information used. So a line or two on that mightn't be a bad shout to ensure that you've ticked every potential box that could be thrown at you in whichever way you want to look at it. But it's very clear for me, for this section, it's quite clear. I'm relating the economic theory. I'm showing my data. I am explaining my data in a step-by-step manner. Okay, and then when it comes to the aspect of the informed arguments or judgments, now be careful that we don't fall into the conclusion part here. Okay, and that could be a trick that we need to watch out for. So watch me as I go into the next part as we go into the conclusion, that we don't over conclude in the research process here. But what you want to be doing is you want to be relating this back to your economic concepts and theories. So for some of your stronger, more capable students, if they can apply this information to an economic concept. So if they, for example, could graph this using a graph that they've covered on the course, that would be very effective, very strong practice for a very capable student. And naturally enough, this is a higher and ordinary level of stating this, so not all students will have the same ability. And obviously, depending on some topics will lend to that, other topics won't. But for some of my stronger students, if they've the topic that's able to do that, I will be encouraging them to do that. Okay, so now moving on to the conclusion then, and this is separately in section B. So they've divided this into section A and section B. So there's a very clear divide as to what they're looking for here. So section A seems to be very much, here's what we're going to discuss, and here's the information I'm presenting. Section B then seems to be taking that information and it's to what we've learned from that. Okay, we've 350 words, which in the context of the overall research study is quite a sizable piece. Now, what they're asking you to do is present conclusions as they relate to the stated line of inquiry, the associated aims, and the economic, concepts in economic theory underpinning the line of inquiry. So let's break that down. So you're looking to conclude on your line of inquiry and conclude on your aims. So on your aims, whether you've given 2, 3, or several aims in the introduction, you need to be answering those aims here very simply. So whatever you've aimed to look at, you need to make sure you're answering those aims in your conclusion. In your line of inquiry, which was an economic question, you need to make sure you've answered that question in the conclusion. Naturally enough, if you've managed to structure your line of inquiry and your aims effectively, you're therefore bringing in your economic theory and economic concepts by doing that all as one. So the key part to the conclusion bit is that you're evaluating the data, you're taking the data that you've found in the research process and seeing, has that answered your economic question, your line of inquiry? Have you answered, or have you succeeded in achieving your aims that you aimed to do at the very start of this process? So have you achieved your aims? Have you answered your line of inquiry? Is it all matching up to economic theory? That is what I feel, going from what I'm reading on that, what they're looking for in that section there. Now, as I say, and I emphasize, this is open to lots of interpretation, okay? I am not writing the marking scheme, so I have no idea. I could be a mile wrong with this, but from what I'm reading off this, and you might have your own ideas of it as well, and that'd be fantastic. This is what I am thinking it is going to be. Now, the fourth section is moving on to the reflection, okay? The reflection is, as we're all very familiar with junior cycle, as we move into senior cycle now, reflection is a key element of what we're doing. We're encouraging the students to reflect all the time on the learning, and as we as teachers as well are encouraged to reflect a lot more as well. And this section, it's a nice small section, 125 to 150 words, so it's not huge, and it's very clear what they're looking for us to do here. They're looking for us to reflect on the insights gained from the engagement with the research study. So what have the students learned from doing this? Okay, what have demonstrate how their thinking has evolved. So at the start of the process, they may have expected to get answers A, B, and C. But as they were doing this, what surprise did they come across? Do they have any difficulty with any part of it? Do they have difficulty getting the data? Did the data present surprises results? Did it not line up with the assumptions with the economic theory that they were expecting originally? That's the kind of angle I'd be expecting from that. So it's very much, the reflection I would think would be a very much a personalized approach, whereas everything up until now has been very much data driven, okay, and is research study driven. The reflection is from a personal point of view. So for example, if they were to do it again, what would they do differently? Okay, and you see there how their attitudes or opinion or behavior may have been changed or may not have been influenced as a result of this research study. So how might they engage in a research study again? Because now they have the experience of doing one. If they were to tell the fifth years, what would they do differently? These are the type of areas that that you'd be looking at in the reflection area. So to surmise on that, what did they learn from it? Did they enjoy the process? What would they do differently? In hindsight, what have they gained from the process of doing the reflection? And this doesn't have to be all rosy. Oh, I did a great job and I think I'm wonderful. A good critical reflection will be able to look at themselves and go, you know what? I spent too much time diddling along looking for data in the wrong places, or my line of inquiry wasn't specific enough and I should have been more narrow at the start and that would have made life easier for me. Those are the type of things, for example, that you could look at as an example. Okay. The last section then is the communication, presentation, and overall coherence section. Okay, now this section here is actually specified already in the outline marking scheme as 15 marks. And what it says: organization, presentation, overall cohesion of the report in respect of general evidence of preparation, planning, implementation, and completion of the research study in the context of the research study brief and the individual line of inquiry. There's an awful lot of words in that. To break that down very simply, okay, these are the marks that you don't want to be losing, okay? So make sure that the report is typed out nicely, that there's lovely clear, it's not one block of text, that there's clear paragraphs, that the tables, if you're using tables or graphs, that they're presented very clearly, that you've met the rubric the requirements of the research study, which is given to you in page 2 of the actual brief. It actually, there's a page there that explains what they're looking for. Okay, for example, the booklet must not exceed 16 pages. If you exceed 16 pages, then you're going to be losing your marks in this section. The text font should be in Arial, font size 12. It's all written out for you very, very clearly on page 2. So that is what they're looking for in this section, I would imagine. So these are easy marks every student should be able to achieve. So don't let your students slip up on that part. It can be a very easy place to pick up some extra marks. So that is a brief overview as to what's been given to us in the report structure in the research report structure outline and the outline marking scheme that's provided to us by the SEC. So to break down, there's, as we said at the start, there's a very clear title, line of inquiry, and aims. And they are 3 very distinct separate things. What each of them mean is very much open to interpretation and definition. There are lots of different resources that explain different interpretations of what they could be. Here is one perspective as to what they could mean, okay? And particularly at this point where a lot of your students would have their title or topic area and are at the point now they've collected the data and are now at the stage of writing up. Now it's the time, if they haven't already, that you need to be starting to refine the title, your line of inquiry, and your aims down to make sure that you're filling in your introduction properly and that you're meeting your conclusion very clearly and properly as well. So what we're saying here is that the title is a short summary of the specific research theme. Okay, so it's your general insight, it's your overview of what you're looking at. Now, to make your title effective, okay, it wants to be very distinct and clear. Okay, you're better off to give a very focused and specific title. Okay, because if you do go too broad on this type of thing, you're making your project your research project very difficult for yourself in the longer term. Okay, so if you have a more narrowed and more focused, it allows you to get stronger results. And that'll often not be informed by the data that's available to you as well. If you, we'll come to the data now in a second, there is lots out there and you can contact a lot of these sources for data and they will give you whatever they have and they can be absolutely fantastic. The stronger your student is, the more focused and in-depth you want it to be so they can get some really meaningful results out of what they're doing. The line of inquiry then is framing your title into an economic question that the student is hoping to answer. Okay, and that's the clear difference between the title and the line of inquiry. The title is the line of inquiry, is the summary of what it is the research project is about, whereas the line of inquiry is your economic question. So it's the what you're trying to find out, and it's framed in an economic concept, because this isn't a history research study report, this isn't a geography one, this is an economic research study report. Finally, then your aims. Now, your aims can be interpreted in different things in different contexts throughout, depending on what the project is you're looking to do. In this, okay, what our aims seem to be is what the student is looking to find out in the context of the specification learning outcomes. So what I would be suggesting here is that this is where the students, it gives them the opportunity basically to, if there was an area of the course they really enjoyed, okay, to go off and do a bit of further learning in that, relating it to the real world, going off and collecting some real data and applying what they've learned on the course to it. When the students are structuring, now this is just one potential way they could structure their learning out, their aims, is to go look at the learning outcome that's of the economic theory that they're looking at and see what is the specification asking them to do. And they could structure their aims from that. So they could pick, so whatever their topic area is, they look at the learning outcome and say, okay, the learning outcome is asking me to look at X, Y, Z. So my aims is to investigate X, investigate Y, investigate Z in the context of the subject area that they're looking at. Okay. I don't want to get into too many examples at the moment because I don't want teachers to be, you guys to be feeling, oh no, we've done this all completely wrong, because I can tell you now you absolutely haven't, because the whole thing of this is that it's very much up to what you have done in your own local school context and what you've done with your teachers and students. So I don't want to start steering people amiss. So it's what you guys are doing now is more than likely absolutely perfect. And it's what I would be saying with your aims is taking it, the aims, looking at the learning outcomes and marrying the two together. Okay. As I say, this is the case for the students where they can actually go off and have a look at something that they've done already on the course and look at it in greater detail. Okay, so the collecting data point of view. Now, at this stage, I'm assuming a lot of your students will have already collected data. Some of it might be way too much data what they need. Some of them are maybe having trouble to refine the data that they need. Okay, the PDST, for those that attended the various PDST training days on the newly senior cycle economics course, presented lots and lots of information to us on how to collect data, how to interpret and analyze data. That data is all that information, all the resources from the PDST are available on skullnet.ie at that link there. This presentation will be available to you after this, but is available to you there as well. There's a wide range of resources there. The obvious go-to one that would be very easy for collecting data is the CSO, the Central Statistics Office. CSO.ie have literally endless resources on everything you could possibly imagine there. And if there's something you can't find easily, you can contact them, of course, and they are very, very good at getting back to you with information as well. So moving on from the data. Now, sustainability is a part that the students are generally struggling to figure out what to actually include. What do we mean by sustainability? So yes, sure, I've got the COVID bit, I've got the economics bit, but where does sustainability fit into the whole thing? So here are the two topics that we were given to do this year. And you can see yourself, sustainable development is a key part of both of them. Now, the key thing to remember is, where does sustainability fit into the course? So there's been lots of different interpretations and ideas of where it is. So if we just take a step back from this for a second and think about, well, where does sustainability fit into what we've actually shown them already? Okay, sustainability is specifically mentioned in the specification. It's in the unifying strand there in 1.3. Okay, so when we're talking about saying sustainability from an economics context, for Leaving Cert Economics, what we see on the screen there now is exactly what we're looking for, okay? So there's outline the concepts of economic, social, environmental sustainability and explain their interconnections, identify indicators of economic growth, social cohesion, inequality, and environmental sustainability, and examine relationships between the indicators. And the final one, which I think is the final one, is the one I really, really like in the context of this one. Consider potential implications of sustainable development for individual behavior, choice, habits, and values, business decisions, and government policy. So a lot of my students have decided to do 3 aims for their research study. 2 of the aims relate to a part of the the specification that relates to the topic area that they're doing, so to speak. And their 3rd aim is relating to that third one there from 1.3, to consider potential implications of sustainable development for, and they're picking the one that's most relevant to them. Okay, so considering the political implications of whatever it is they're doing on sustainable development for whichever one of those they're looking at. So that's where they're bringing in their sustainability into it. And it's given, for that, a lot of them, it gives them a clear focus as to where and why they're making it sustainable in a meaningful way and not just in a tokenistic tick box way. And I suppose for many of us, when we were, I know for myself, when we were at the training days and we were being told about, you know, this idea of a unifying strand that we're incorporating throughout, I suppose this now gives a greater context to where those 1.1, 2, and 3, we're not just teaching them in isolation as the first 3 chapters in the book that we have to get through at the start of the year or midway through the year. Is that we're integrating them at every opportunity we can throughout the teaching of the course, where appropriate and applicable, of course. Okay. Now, another way you could do it as well, if your student has a topic where your head is banging against a wall and you can't see what you can do at all, the other way you could look at it as well, or you could do this in addition as well, is looking at the Sustainable Development Goals. So the Sustainable Development Goals is another thing we do, incorporating throughout education, not only in economics, but in other various subjects as well. We're incorporating a lot more Sustainable Development Goals throughout. The website given to there, sdgs.un.org/goals, provides the 17 goals in a very, very clear fashion, okay? And when you click into them, it gives you the targets and breaks it down within that. I can tell you now, I have never come across a project, be it for in the context of the research study report here, or in the context of, say, the Young Economist of the Year competition, that hasn't related to one of the Sustainable Development Goals somehow. There is endless information there for the students to be able to, and I can guarantee you every project that any of you ever have will relate to one of them in some way or another, and they can create an aim out of that at all. For your more capable students that really want to be pushing the boundaries, I'd say there's no harm in doing both. So relating to the sustainability that we talked about in the last slide in the context of the specification, and linking to a sustainable development goal for your really high flying strong students. Obviously that wouldn't be applied to all students, but I do think there is scope and ability for some students that really want to push themselves to be able to do that. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a pause for a deep breath. And I'm going to do a pause for a slight Q&A. I can see there's been a few questions have popped in so far. So I'm going to take a quick look at that there. And I'm probably going to have to unmute you guys before I break into the Q&A rooms. Absolutely. I'm just going to see if I can click unmute all, ask all to unmute. Excellent. There we go. So now you've all been unmuted. I suggest so sorry, just the first question there. So it's, I'm just going to go through some of the Q&A into the chat bar for the moment, and then we'll see if people can show hands or something like that. So should we clearly state the learning outcomes? So I do have them written down there. So,
okay, sweetheart.
So should you clearly state the learning outcomes? To be fair, we don't know. We haven't been specifically told if they should be clearly stated or not. It's no harm. You know what I mean, to say that you're referencing learning outcome 4.1, for example, but they haven't specifically asked for it, so I don't think you actually need to, so to speak. Okay. Do you outline your sources in the introduction? My understanding of that, so if I go back to that slide there, okay, yes, I would list. I'm sorry. Your sources should be listed in the introduction 100%. Should you be stating primary sources to be used? I'm not sure what primary sources you're going to be specifically using in that context. I would be listing all your sources in any source you're planning to use, you're listing in the introduction, to be fair. Is what I would be
Alright, James, just regarding outlining your sources in the introduction, like a lot of my students would be using a good few sources in their research process, and I like, you know, and they're referencing them there, and then they're putting them into the bibliography again. So like, I suppose, so you reckon they need to be written down, your sources, like the sources I'm going to use are like an article from the Irish Times, CSO information on unemployment. Is that what you're kind of saying?
Yeah, I think the difference, that's a great question there. I'm not sure that came from whoever was, a great question. I think that just to summarize what you're saying there, are you stating your sources, number one, in the introduction and then again in the references and bibliography? And I would say the answer to that is yes, but the key difference is in the reference and bibliography section, you're clearly stating with your proper referencing there, with your title, your author, your publisher, the edition and the year. Whereas in the introduction, you're stating, this is where I'm getting my information from. So I got my information from cso.ie, from The Economist magazine, from the Irish Times, etc., for example. Okay, does that answer your question?
Sorry, James, I'm just wondering, would I be able to ask a quick question regarding the title? So, you know, there's a box before the introduction where students are to print their title.
Yes,
and that, so do you think that that needs to be there and again in the introduction? I just think it's a little bit unclear in the guidelines.
I'd agree with what you're saying there completely. It is a bit unclear. I would say yes, put it in both.
Both, okay.
That's what I'm getting my students to do. And as I say, we're all in this together in terms of trying to interpret it. But I would say I'm getting my students to put it into the title. So I think the title part of the research project is to give the examiner the context of where it's at. And then it's clearly specified to have in the introduction there. So if it's asking first, I'd say go first. There's no harm. You're not going to lose marks for putting it in.
And I had there in the introduction, I had gotten my students to print which of the two topics, but do you think that's unnecessary? So take that out and just put the title in instead. Sorry,
say that again. In the introduction, you're getting them to put in.
I had originally gotten my students to put in which of the two topics, you know, there's two. So printing, identifying the actual topic that they're,
topic two. Again, to be honest with you, I don't think it's any harm to put that in. I mean, we're all going to have different interpretations on this, to be fair, and it's going to take a couple of years for us to really know what's exactly required. So what I've gone through there is, as you see yourself, that's the document that's given to us of what they're asking for us as a minimum. Okay, and I would emphasize that's the minimum. So there is other stuff that we just don't know yet until we get into it, what's going to be required. So I think absolutely when you have ideas like that to put in, I think that would absolutely be no harm to do.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. Carolyn there, I think, has her hand up. Carolyn, I'm sorry, will I? Okay, just in terms of other stuff, there's who's coming. Oh yeah, sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Jane. No, I was just going to say there is something about that you can if you have more sources, like if they have more than 3 or 4 or whatever, you have to put into your references that you can put into your references any sources that they've read but didn't cite. So I'd probably put into that introduction the sources that I cited from, if you know what I mean.
So yeah, so you're saying that they might have looked up, let's say they could have looked up, say, 6 or 7 different sources, but didn't end up using them. Is that what would you include them in your?
Yeah, there's definitely something written to say actually on that referencing page, is it page 9, and that says that you should. I think there's somewhere in that document that says you should cite even the ones you don't cite from, that you should include.
Absolutely. Now we to be fair, actually, we haven't actually talked about the referencing. I've deliberately steered clear of the referencing and bibliography section, to be honest. That's obviously one that maybe I should have addressed. So what it says here, include full references for all sources cited in your report. You should also include additional source of information that you consulted but have not cited in your report. So let's just say, for example, you decided to look up statista.com for your sources, for your data originally, and then realized you didn't like the data there, so you end up going back to cso.ie for their data as well. So this Statista information may never actually appear in your research report, but yes, you would absolutely put that into your references and bibliography as well.
Yeah, that's right,
Yeah,
that's all I want to say.
Perfect. Thanks, Karen.
Thanks.
So I'm trying to, there's lots of questions coming in here, so I'm just trying to skim back through them there. Will the presentation be emailed to you? It will be definitely available on the BSTI website after. I'm not 100% sure if it'll be emailed out to you, but it's definitely going to be available online. Referencing seems to be an issue. So referencing is something that's coming up again and again. Referencing now, the bottom line on this is that we don't have massive amount of guidance as to what's required on the referencing. The department, like the SEC or NCCA, haven't specified that we need to use, say, for example, Harvard, Chicago, or MLA, or any specific referencing style in this at all. If we look towards one of our, say, sister studies, say, for example, history, I've been doing a research study report for years. For their referencing, they also don't need a specific referencing style. But what they do need, they have a bibliography and reference bibliography section the way we do. And what they're required to put in is the title, author, publisher, the edition of the source, if applicable, and the year the source was published. I would speculate that on a level of consistency that they would do likewise here in economics. However, again, they haven't specified that they want a specific style or don't want a specific style, but going by that as a precedent, I would speculate that that would be sufficient for us. Okay. I'm just going, so I'm going through there. How do you think you can stretch the introduction to 200 plus words, 200 to 250 words? That is a good question. So how can we get that up there? So the introduction slide, it's the one on the screen there now. Providing a title for this. So by the time you've done your title, line of inquiry, with your economic question, your aims, however many aims you used to have, and listing your data. 200 words could be a struggle to get that far. So other stuff you could put contextualize there is contextualize, well, why are you looking at this piece of information? Why do you feel, why did you decide to do this? Have you a interest in this? Why do you think this is relevant to the study in economics? So depending on the word count you have left, now you won't have a huge amount of words count left by the time you've added that in, but why you have decided to do this, contextualize it for the examiner. Why are you doing this? Okay, there was a good suggestion earlier there from someone, I can't remember who it was, that said, for example, you can state which of the two research topics you're doing. That would be a very logical thing to include there as well, I think, as to which, if you're doing topic 1 or topic 2. So that would make sense to me.
Or James, they could just add in quite a few sources as well.
Sorry, can you say that again, person?
They could put sources in there. Like, yeah, I got some of my weaker ones, I got them to look up, they put in just news articles, and they kind of padded it out that way.
Absolutely, yeah, 100% right, 100% right. That's a great idea, great suggestion as well, actually, yeah, perfect. Okay. Question.
Particularly if sorry, go on.
No, go on.
Particularly if the SEC kind of look at it and kind of like are looking for certain things, like more is, like the way they approach the assessment task, the junior search. So they were kind of approached it on a number of points. So I would say probably more is better there.
Yeah, absolutely. What I'm going to do now, folks, okay, is I'm going to put you into breakout rooms, okay? And what I'm going to do is, while you're doing the breakout rooms, because there's lots and lots of questions that have come in both privately and publicly there. So I'm going to try and consolidate those questions to give a bit more feedback now in a few minutes time. What I'm going to do for the next 10, 15 minutes or so is put you into breakout rooms, okay? And what I'm going to get you guys to do in the context of what there's 2 things you can do. You can discuss what we've discussed here and brainstorm what you've done within amongst yourselves. But also ideally is that if you can think about what we've discussed and think about a sample title, any title, and come up with a line of inquiry and aims for your research study on that. In an ideal world, what would be really nice is that if you could document that down, you can email it into us, and then we'll send that out, or we'll put to everybody, or put it on the BSTI website. I'll have to chat with the BSTI about how we'll do that. So then at least we're coming back with, so that means you're leaving here with lots of different examples of example titles, line of inquiries, and aims. So what I'm going to do at this moment now, I am going to pause the recording while I do that, and then put you into breakout rooms. So bear with me 2 seconds. No, that's not what I wanted to do. If I press on, okay. So for the purpose of the recording, we're just back from the breakout rooms, and I'm just answering a few questions that I got in the chat in the meantime. There was so yeah, it doesn't matter if they're all online sources. There's nothing I can read in any of the documentation that specifies that you have to have a mixture of resources between online and hard copy sources or not. So I think it's absolutely fine that they be all online resources, particularly given the COVID climate at the moment, that people can't get can't get to libraries and stuff as they would have in the past. So I think online resources alone is completely fine in that context. Yes, the presentation is being recorded, and as far as I know, will be available at a later date in the future, presumably on the BSTI website, I'm assuming. Okay. So there was a question from a person called Sarah, if she wants to pipe up there now.
Yeah, I was just wondering how, when they're creating their aims, how closely do you have to link it to the specification? So when I was talking to the guys, I was going to tell them like they use kind of keywords from specification or the concept. So for example, one of them had, how have the government aligned their fiscal policy to combat the loss of the earnings for mental health charities / services? Like, is that specific enough? Or?
Oh, I think so. I think absolutely so. What you're saying there sounds completely in line with what my interpretation would be. I mean, I think the key thing here about this is that there is no, we don't know the exact right or wrong answers. Literally what we have here as outline the aims of this line of inquiry in the context of the learning outcomes of the specification. So on a simple level, my context from that would be very basically, don't go off the specification, don't go beyond the specification, do what we've studied in the course. And secondly, I think it would be ideal if we looked at, if the students took their depth of knowledge to be in line with what the specification is asking us to look at. But that's my interpretation of it. I could be a mile wrong with that, but I think what you've said there is absolutely perfect, Sarah. I think as long as you're in the general sphere of that, I think you're very much on the right page.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, I think you could use, basically, if you use the learning outcomes specification to help you guide in your idea of focus, and getting into a lovely, like, narrow focused topic.
Yeah, because I just gave them the specification and told them then to, when they were creating their aims, to go through the words that were used in the outcomes.
Yeah, perfect. I think. Just in regards to the research topic and the use of the words potential implications of the COVID-19 crisis, how much should the students be focusing on forecasting what potentially happened as opposed to what has happened? So that's a very good question. I'll put it this way, it should be informed, or I would think it should be informed by the data that you're presenting. So for example, if your students have looked up data, say for example, in whatever situation is in a case pre-COVID, so using 2019 data, and then say using data since COVID, so for example, Q2 2020 data, I suppose you're more speaking about the implication of what has happened and what could happen as a result of this. So I think it's more, you're focusing, this is very much a research project, a data-driven research project. So you're telling us what the data is telling us. It's not asking us specifically to make a future prediction. It's asking us to interpret and analyze data and make evaluations on the data presented. I hope that's clear to that question. For the person that's asking there. If anyone wants to ask a question, don't be afraid to raise your hand. Michael Gallagher, you have a question there.
Hi, how you doing? I'm just raising something because I have to go, and I'm speaking not as an economics teacher. This is actually great fun to watch when you don't have to worry about economics because I'm not teaching it. But I'm just posting a message now. Anybody who needs an attendance cert, it will be available on the new Dublin BASTI website, which will be there in the comments now. So let me see, I've lost you. Sorry, I can't. Sorry, James, I can't hear you. So there is our new Dublin website, which will have all our information for future meetings. But if anybody needs a attendance cert, if they go to that site, there's a link there for a form to fill in for an attendance cert. Okay. So thanks very much, and fair play to all people. It seems to have gone really well. Congratulations.
That's brilliant, Michael. Thank you very much for that. As I say, anyone else has questions, don't be afraid to raise your hand. Question there, is anyone telling their students about using software, e.g. Zotero, which can combine and produce bibliographies from anything read online? I think to go back and emphasize, there was a good few questions in the breakout rooms about referencing and the referencing style and whatnot. What they do in history is that they have to reference, they basically, in their reference and bibliography, what they need to state is the title of the publication, the author, the publisher, what edition of the publication, if it's say the second edition or third edition, if that's applicable, and the year that it was published. That's what they look for there. And in history, they don't have insight referencing or in-text referencing as a requirement in the history ORSR. And that's the history ORSR. That does not mean that applies to the economics ORSR. The simple answer is we don't know. I mean, there's great resource available on the PDST website, on schoolnet.ie, in the same link that I've given earlier, actually, about how to do Harvard referencing if you want. But the key thing that I think is appropriate is that you're consistent. Whatever you decide that your class is going to do, that it's consistently applied across your class. You can't go a mile wrong on that, to be honest with you. Because they haven't specified any specific referencing style, they can't enforce that you have to have a referencing style, I wouldn't think. So therefore it would be up to you. I think as long as you're consistent, whatever you guys have on this, there's lots, so there is information out there, so to speak. Okay. Any other questions there now? So there's one there. Are students expected to present potential solutions to problems they have likely identified in their research? I was going to say, unless that's one of your aims, I wouldn't say so. No. I mean, I think personally, my interpretation of this is that you're taking data, you're interpreting the data, analyzing the data, and coming to a conclusion based on the data that answers your aims and your line of inquiry. The only solutions to the future stuff may be linked into your sustainability question, but there's definitely very little on that says specifically that you have to go and predict what the future outcome of this will be. I suppose that'll come down specifically in terms of what it is your line of inquiry is. So each line of inquiry will be different on that. But in terms of requirement that every project has to have one, I wouldn't say no, every project has to have it at all. Just on that, someone's messaging in there saying, for if you want to be aware, Zotero, Z-O-T-E-R-O, will compile and produce bibliography automatically. So that could be helpful for people. I've never used it myself, but just someone's messaging in there that could be useful for people as well. So Carolyn, you've got your hand up there for a question.
Yes, no, sorry, James, but just that last question about a solution. If they're doing line of inquiry too, they possibly have to propose some sort of, because it says the implication for government policy. Yeah, so I would get, yeah, so I'd get them to do a solution if they're doing line of inquiry too.
And it depends within that what their aims are and what their line of inquiry is within that. So it's very hard to answer on a general level, but it depends what specifically they're looking at there.
Yeah, but that does specifically state, I think, what are the implications for government policy.
So, I mean, I suppose what you could say, I mean, yes, but I mean, the other thing you could say for that is that government, let's say if you look at the increasing unemployment, okay, well, what effect is that going to have for government policy? Well, you're basically just making a general comment on that there by saying that, well, if unemployment continues to grow, in this case, that'll mean the government will have to, for example, invest more money in retraining schemes to try and boost employment.
Yeah, yeah.
That type of stuff. But I wouldn't.
Yeah, that's just all. Yeah. So that is a solution, though. You know,
it is
one way of dealing with it.
I was going to say it's not the main aim of the research report.
No, it's kind of in line with inquiry too. It's all rolled into the one. It would be part of your conclusion, I would imagine. It'd have to be.
That's what I'm saying. If you bring us back to what, and the key thing is looking here as to what they've given us.
It's not the same for line of inquiry one, for line of inquiry two.
Karen, I think I'm not. I lost their slide, but I think what I get out there is you're right that in line of inquiry one, it wouldn't really be required, but line of inquiry two, it would be required. But I think what I'm just saying to you is that it's not the overarching theme of the project. The main theme of the project is that it's a data-driven research project, that they're looking for each other. That's the main thing. So in the context of when you're structuring it, that you're not spending the entire project trying to produce suggestions and solutions going forward. The main thing is you're spending the heart and soul of your project on the actual.
Oh yeah, the policies would only really, the implication for policy would, I'd imagine, only comes in on the conclusion section.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we're on the same page there. Absolutely on the
Yeah.
same.
It's not part of the research section at all. No.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was trying to say. Yeah, no, perfect. I think we're on the same page there, Colin. Excellent.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. Absolutely.
Thanks.
Okay, folks. So sorry. There's a lot of questions coming in privately and publicly there. So hang on 2 seconds there to the thing. Google Docs apparently have handy citation tools too. Fantastic. Would I recommend drawing demand or supply curve or both to illustrate the economic concept? I was going to say yes. If the student is able to, has picked a line of inquiry that it can actually, that they can graphically draw their material, I think that would be very, very highly effective practice. You know, but the key thing is that they don't just draw it and go, ta-da, there's my supply and demand curve, haha. That you're actually explaining that graph. So if you're going to draw, if you're going to match your line of inquiry to an economic concept by graphing it, which is brilliant, make sure you explain that graph, that you don't just leave it there for people to see, that you're actually giving a bit more to it, so that you're showing that you actually fully understand and know what you've just put together there. But I think that would be excellent. And for a strong student, a very capable student, that would be wonderful. Okay, so last chance saloon there for any last questions. I don't see any hands up there. I don't think. Do you see any hands up there? No. Excellent. Okay. Well, folks, in that case then, I think we'll wrap it up for the evening. I hope you found this somewhat beneficial and they've given you some guidance as to where things all are at. I'm going to pass you back over to Lisa Young there now. What I will say, so just to recap on what we've done there now, anyways, so basically we've given you guidance on what goes into each of the parts of the research structure report. We've distinguished between your title, your line of inquiry, and the aims, and what the difference between those three things are. We spoke briefly about the data and where you can get your data sources from and how they're available on the PDST website, and I've given you that there. And we discussed about how you can incorporate sustainability into your projects there as well. Folks, we hope you found that useful. If you have any questions, you can email in james.doyle1@ucd.ie. I will do my best to get back to you in the fullness of time. And I look forward to seeing you all sometime in the future, please God. So thank you very much. Lisa, pass back over to you there.
Perfect. James, thank you so much. The comments there are so positive, and in my breakout room as well, the feedback has been amazing. So thank you. I'm so grateful. And yeah, it's been an amazing evening. Thank you so much. And to Alan as well for doing the admin there in the back as well. We're very grateful. I just see a few kind of things coming in there as well, but we can maybe deal with them again later on, and people can email you as well, as you said there. We're hoping to have this up online on the BSTI website very soon, and I'll talk to the Dublin branch about sharing your notes, or we'll talk to you about it again afterwards. I know that came up there a few times. So yeah, so again, just a quick reminder there that the Leaving Cert accounting talk is tomorrow evening at 8 o'clock, and the link will be sent out tomorrow, and that is to review the 2020 paper. And Michael has a comment in the comment section there, Michael Galligan from the Dublin branch, and he said that if you want a certificate for tonight, just to check out the Dublin branch website, and the link is in the comment section there. Again, James, thank you so much. I am so incredibly grateful. So, and thank you to everyone who has made the effort to come tonight and everything. We're very, very grateful. So if people want to start logging off, you're more than welcome, and thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Thank you all. See you again soon. Bye now.
Bye.